I'm at the Doukhobor Heritage Village in Castlegar, British Columbia. So I'm going to take you guys on a tour of this place. Oh yeah, and I don't know Russian, so you're going to have to forgive me if I mispronounce some words. Sorry. In 1785, the Russian Orthodox Archbishop of Ekaterinoslav referred to a group of Russian religious dissidents as Doukhobors. The term means spirit wrestlers and was intended as a derogatory label, suggesting that the dissidents were struggling against the Russian Orthodox Church and the Holy Spirit. The dissidents embraced the name. They were spirit wrestlers, they said, because they struggled against darkness and evil in a wider world and within themselves, aided and empowered by the Holy Spirit itself. They believed that only love had the power to bring about a better world for all human beings, and rejected the use of violence of any kind. Doukhobors based their spiritual philosophy on two principles: recognize and love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. What is God? They were asked. God is spirit. God is love. Where there is love, there is God. What is the soul? The soul is the part of God that dwells within each person. It returns to its source after earthly life is over. The Doukhobors believed that Jesus Christ was born, lived a mortal life, and died in the flesh. They believed that his spiritual essence, the Christ consciousness, was resurrected within his followers and continues to be resurrected in the hearts of loving people who follow his teachings today. Inspired by the high ideals and insightful leadership of Peter V. Varrigan, the Doukhobors made a decisive stand against militarism and all forms of violence. War, they said, is incompatible with Christianity. On June 29, 1895, known as Peter's Day, about 7,000 Doukhobors destroyed their weapons in a decisive demonstration of pacifism. They said that to kill another being is to kill God, since the Spirit of God dwells within each person. The Doukhobor stand against violence was met with harsh oppression by Russian state and church authorities. This persecution attracted worldwide attention, as well as assistance from humanitarians such as Lev Tolstoy, his publisher Vladimir Chertkov, and their colleagues. Through their efforts, arrangements were made with Clifford Sifton, Canadian Minister of the Interior, and roughly 75 Doukhobors immigrated to Canada in 1899, settling in the area known as Assiniboia. Between 1908 and 1913, about 5,000 Doukhobors came to settle in British Columbia after the Canadian government of the time reversed the land settlement policy in Saskatchewan, forcing community Doukhobors to forfeit their hard-won prairie settlements. In order to continue their communal lifestyle, they chose a spacious and beautiful valley in the Selkirk Mountains as their new home. Their leader, Peter V. Varrigan, named it Dolina Utashinia, the Valley of Consolation. Near the original settlement at Brilliant, named for the sparkling waters of the Kootenay and Columbia rivers, is the historic Doukhobor Suspension Bridge. Built in 1913, the bridge is now fully restored and has been declared a National Heritage Site. Major agrarian settlement of the area began with the arrival of the Doukhobors in 1908. Their original purchase was 14,000 acres, but under the dynamic leadership of Peter Varrigan, holdings were soon expanded into the Grand Forks area. By the time their leader suffered an untimely, tragic death in 1924, the Doukhobor community, incorporated in 1917 as the Christian Community of Universal Brotherhood, operated over 71,000 acres of improved land, mostly in British Columbia, but also including operations in Alberta and Saskatchewan. There were 90 villages in British Columbia, many of them constructed from locally made red brick, most in the West Kootenay boundary area. Lucaria was born in a small Russian village in 1836. At the age of 16, she wed the Doukhobor leader Peter Kalmykov, who became ill while hunting in 1864. Since the couple had no children together, Peter's deathbed wish was that his beloved wife would become the leader of the Doukhobors. Lucaria quickly became one of the Doukhobors' most successful and dynamic leaders. Along with protecting her people, who were pacifists, from military conscription in Russia, she would frequently visit different Doukhobor villages and encourage prayers, singing, and festivities. It should be noted that Doukhobor singing became much more lively and exuberant during the period that Lucuria oversaw the Doukhobors. Under her 22 years of leadership, the Doukhobors prospered economically in an era known as the Golden Age. Upon having visions of her untimely demise and troubling times ahead, Lucuria mentored Peter V. Verrigan to be her successor. She took him into her home and taught him to read, write, and emphasize significant Doukhobor customs. After her death in 1886, Peter V. Verrigan, also known as Peter Lordly Verrigan, became esteemed leader of the Doukhobors, as prophesied by Lucuria. Early 1900s, pioneer families ate from large wooden bowls passed down the table from one person to another. Women worked together to cook for the village, taking turns at being head cook for the week. The large dining room was the center of community activity, serving as a prayer hall on Sundays and as a workshop on cold winter days when outside work was difficult. Imagine this room crowded with people, men doing wood or leather work, women spinning, knitting, or mending, children playing games or learning from the adults. Everyone is singing together, and sunflower seed shells litter the wooden floor. This stamping mill was made by Ivan D. Kinnikin. It is a prototype of the mill which was made by the Doukhobors in 1915. When a group of Doukhobors came to BC, they cleared the bush and planted millet. However, they did not have a machine to separate the grain. It was powered by water and separated the millet from the chaff. Out of this they made kasha, or porridge. Peter Verrigan was born in 1859, the sixth of 7 brothers. At an early age, he received private tutoring along with the other 2 youngest brothers, Vasily and Gregory, and they commenced to run a family store. The Verrigan family was well off, at that time possessing properties and several thousand sheep and cattle. In 1886, Lucuria Kalmakova died, and in 1887, Peter, who had been apprenticed to her for Doukhobor leadership studies since 1882, was exiled to Siberia, an exile that would last 16 years until his arrival in Canada in 1902. Through intrepid couriers, he maintained contact with the large party of Doukhobors and was able to send directives. In 1894, Tsar Nicholas II decided to quell the unrest among his subjects by insisting that all citizens swear the oath of allegiance. Peter advised against this, as well as exhorting the followers to return to their earlier beliefs and abstain from alcohol, meat, and tobacco. After successfully leading his followers to the settlement in BC, Peter Verrigan was killed on October 29, 1924, in a mysterious and still-to-be-solved train explosion. Various theories and speculations have arisen regarding this event, but to date no firm conclusions have been drawn. The absence of any government information regarding the ongoing investigation deepens the mysterious aspect of this tragic circumstance. Most children of the period would have had a rag doll with an embroidered face like this one on display. In a crowded community house that could have sheltered up to 50 people, this room would be the living quarters of a small family. A newborn could sleep in the hanging cradle, while a small child would have a bed of his or her own. Older children often slept together in a dormitory-style room elsewhere in the building, or in the attic loft. In this era, a busy mother would still have enough leisure time to crochet fine items like this camisole top and sleep cap. This room features what it was like in the 1960s. The bed frame is made from iron rods, which were usually purchased by mail order, then assembled and painted at home. The mattress is also manufactured rather than being made at home out of feathers or wool. Some women of this era still spun woolen yarn by hand, but the crocheted afghan here is made with acrylic fiber. The lamp and sewing machine are both electric. Families moving here from Saskatchewan to British Columbia would have had very few material possessions. Most of what they owned would have been clothing and other textiles and tools, all of which were handmade. Pioneer-era bedrooms did not have bedsteads. Family members slept on wooden benches covered with rugs and blankets. During the day, bedding was put away so the rooms could function as a living and working spaces in which to weave, spin, sew, or take care of children. Clothing was made from locally produced flax, hemp, and wool. Furniture was hand-built. Books were not common as most community members were illiterate. There was little ornament or embellishment anywhere in the community home. Most of the textiles are handmade in this room. The hooked wool rug, the fine lace tablecloth, embroidered with a Russian V which could have stood for Varagin, the men's linen tunic, but their fineness suggests an economically privileged household. The suitcase and storage chest were made by hand, as were the decorative women's shoes, whose leather soles are attached with small nails. The men's slippers were crocheted from rough hemp fiber. The room has a proper bedstead, which would have been covered with a feather mattress and wool blanket. This room contains items that could have belonged to Doukhobor leader Peter P. Varagin and his wife. In the 1930s, community homes still did not have electricity or indoor plumbing. Most people rose at dawn and went to sleep at dusk. If they stayed up late, it was by candlelight or kerosene lamp. The washstand in this room features an enamel bowl and pitcher. The cupboard underneath would have held a chamber pot called a cushion, where occupants could relieve themselves at night, saving a trip to the outhouse. The banya, or bathhouse, has been used as a form of purification and detoxification dating back to medieval times. It was customary on holy days to clean the home and self. After Sunday prayer sobrenie, women and children would use the banya for laundry. The wood stove would heat the water and the clothes would be washed in the washboard agitator. When ideal temperatures were reached, hot water would be splashed onto the rocks, creating steam. Warm water would be poured into buckets to bathe, and the process would be completed by a cold water flush. A vinik is a bundle of leafy tree twigs. The body is slapped with the wet broom to draw the maximum amount of heat and steam to a person's body during the final stages of steaming in the sauna. Different materials are used to reach the desired effect. This unique hay wagon has a feature invented by the Doukhobor workers who most likely used it for work in apple and pear orchards as well as hay gathering. The feature here is the center part of the wagon, which is recessed. This allowed the pickers to drive up to apple trees and sort and box apples on the spot, then store them in the center cavity. When this area was filled level, future boxes were stacked on top. When the load was complete, the wagon would be driven to a central packing shed where the boxes would be unloaded for shipment. After the brilliant bridge was built in 1913, the fruit could be hauled directly to the train station for shipping or to the KC preserving works. The wagon could also be used for hauling hay needed to feed the horses, carrying out various other draught tasks, such as logging. When the Doukhobors began to disassociate themselves from the rituals of the Russian Orthodox Church, it was through the initiative of their first spiritual leaders that their own forms of worship were established. It has been passed down to us by our forefathers that the major advance in establishing Doukhobor forms of worship took place at the Milky Waters settlement in the province of Tavria at the beginning of the 1800s, under the outstanding Doukhobor leader Savily Kapustin. Having set aside idolization of the Bible and other so-called sacred writings, the Doukhobors acknowledged as their guidance their own book of life, composed of psalms, which were committed to memory. On the table that stood at the head of the congregation, the Doukhobors placed bread, salt, and water. In similarity with the early Christians, the men assembled to the right of the table and the women to the left. During their prayer service, people bowed to the person next to him, signifying recognition of the Spirit of God, which, according to Doukhobor beliefs, dwelt within the heart and soul of every individual human being. Bread, salt, and water were chosen as the material objects to be placed on the table because, as objects representing the basic staff of life, they were the simplest symbols to reflect the Doukhobor life concept. These objects symbolized peace and hospitality among the Slavic people from the most ancient times. When one ancient tribe met another tribe with bread and salt on a platter, this meant that they were ready and willing to live with them in peace and friendship and share with them the products of their labor. Our symbols, bread, salt, and water, denote that we are people of peace. We will not raise our hands in violence against our fellow man, even in the protection of our own lives or in protection of our worldly belongings. We can use only spiritual force of love in our struggle against evil. Every Doukhobor is ever ready to share whatever he has with any and every needy fellow human being. In our 20th century, one of our late Doukhobor leaders, Peter V. Verrigan Lordley, in a very concise way reiterated the meaning of our symbols that are ever present at Doukhobor services. He said, bread, salt, and water symbolize our basic principle, toil and peaceful life. Hi.
How did it
you're
go?
okay. Good, good. I just want to show the gift area.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So why isn't Verrigan's grave open? I'm so sad about that.
I think it's just because COVID right now.
Yeah, but it's out in the open.
Yeah, I know. I don't, I'm not 100% sure on who kind of
Who closed it?
maintains it.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I see.
Because to my knowledge, it's not us.
Oh, it's not you guys, okay.
Yeah, not us directly. Yeah, so, yeah. that's the reason I was given. Which, yeah, hopefully it opens sometime soon.
Yeah.
I know, like, the grounds do need to be maintained there.
How long is that movie?
Ooh, an hour and something.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's fairly long.
I hung in there for about 45 minutes. I
Okay,
think,
wow,
but-
yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's over 2 hours. I think it's like an hour and a half.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I've been told that some people have stayed for the whole thing.
Yeah.